Well, good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome along to the October edition of the Landlord Lens. This is the content collab between propertytribes.com and also the National Residential Landlords Association. My name is Vanessa Warwick. I'm co-founder of Property Tribes and a landlord of some 18 years now, and my co-host is NRLA CEO Ben Beadle, who is joining me as always. And Ben, we're into our third landlord lens now, and we've had some really fantastic feedback to the format, and that's essentially that we're looking at the trending topics that landlords are discussing on the Property Tribes forum, because the most trending topic, it's always the most up-to-date and most relevant to the community. So it's kind of a barometer of what landlords are feeling, where their pain points are. So it's very interesting once a month to look at those trending topics and see what is engaging the landlord community. I'm sorry if you heard a cat in the background there. He's just joined us. We will be talking about pets in rental properties. That's one of the main topics of today. But Ben, before we get going, you know, again, another month has passed since we were last talking. Have you been as busy as always?
Yeah, we have, and I think the trending topics, Vanessa, reflect a time that is a really difficult one for landlords. You know, as if COVID wasn't enough for us all to deal with. You know, we've got hand grenades in terms of, you know, pets in property, the Green Initiative, you know, people setting out their stalls for the Renters Reform Bill, as we will be doing next month as well. So, you know, there's a big dichotomy of issues all coming together at once, and I think that, you know, this webinar brings together all of those things that are vexing our landlord audiences.
Indeed, and it sometimes feels like we're kind of in a perfect storm, but you know, there is always a calm after the storm. You can weather the storm. So a lot about what we're trying to do with these webinars is actually to provide solutions to these problems, help people find their way through all these different challenges that are coming at landlords seemingly in increasing velocity. So that's what the webinar is all about, really, isn't it, Ben? That we're going to look at those issues, you know, chew the cud on them, and if required, you know, provide some solutions, keep landlords moving forwards.
Yeah, I think it's really important, to be honest, Vanessa, because there is a lot of you know, misinformation out there. And you know, what my hope is that we at least bring together the issues, as well as you know, take a pragmatic look at the solutions to them. We're both landlords. We're both involved in the sector, and we both got a lot of experience when it comes to day-to-day landlording. And you know, to be frank, we need it because it's sort of seat of the pants time, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the roller coaster ride that is being a landlord.
I totally agree. I don't think any of us, whether we've been a landlord for, you know, 10 years or 40 years, has ever been through what we're experiencing post COVID-19 lockdown, the economic fallout, and all the other kind of pressures on the private rented sector. So very challenging times for landlords, but definitely lots of reasons to feel positive and to see opportunity. So we'll go to the first topic, Ben. Obviously, one of the things that we've talked a lot about in the previous editions of the Landlord Lens is evictions and possession. That, of course, is kind of always somewhere on the agenda. But in the last couple of weeks, we've had these new tiers introduced to local lockdown, and you know, stories of bailiffs refusing to undertake evictions, etc. So what's your view on this kind of tier approach?
Well, I think, yeah, a tiered approach is marginally better than a full lockdown. You know, it's like it feels like choosing between, you know, what method of torture would you like? Do you want to be waterboarded, or do you want to have your nails pulled out? You know, yes, it's marginally better. I think the thing that sticks with me is that at least courts are open, at least courts can progress the most serious claims. If you're not in tier 2 and 3, bailiffs can exercise, or will exercise rather, the instructions of the courts. But obviously, if you are in a tier 2 or a tier 3 area, they won't, and that's the instruction that's been given. And I think I'm quite keen to see to understand a little bit more around what some of the exceptions to those are, because we are talking about exceptions, and there does need to be exceptions. And I think, you know, this comes back to the wider society point of COVID isn't going to go away, so we need to live and exist with it. I'm not even sure we're sort of halfway through the storm at the moment as we enter this second phase, but obviously the impact of people not being able to evict problematic tenants has been well told by the NRLA in terms of the hardship that it causes to landlords, and we continue to keep the situation under review. The fact of the matter is that from a policy and campaigning perspective, the impact of no evictions being carried out in tier 2 or 3 areas will affect a minority of cases. So there probably won't be a massive appetite politically to do something about it. But as I say, we're keeping the situation under review, and we certainly want to see landlords' possession rights strengthened as part of the Renters Reform Bill and as part of Section 21 going. No doubt we'll get onto that with the TLIC report later.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that this whole eviction and possession scenario has provided the kind of anti-landlord brigade some unfortunate fuel, so to speak. There have been stories of illegal evictions. We had a discussion on property tribes, which we did allow in the end, but only for educational purposes, where one landlord was asking if they could turn the utilities off to get rid of their tenant. And we thought long and hard about allowing that, but so many people piled in and said, no, that's against the law, including landlord and tenant solicitor David Smith. So we shut it down, but we've left it there just for educational purposes. But of course, these kind of really emotive stories of unethical landlords, it's just feeding into the media's anti-landlord rhetoric, isn't it?
I think it is, and it's also feeding in, I think, to the political situation, which is that whether you like it or not, whether you're pro-landlord or anti-landlord, the fact of the matter is that landlords are here and they are providing a service. Like it or lump it, that's the situation, and it's not going to change. Probably not in my lifetime. It might get worse, but it fundamentally, I don't think is going to change. The point around illegal evictions, that is a direct result of policy failure. Landlords have to have confidence in being able to get their property back. I've spoken with Chris Pincher. Even with Section 21 going, landlords are still going to be able to get their properties back for rent arrears, damage, antisocial behaviour, moving back in or selling the property. Fact. So if landlords are shut off from their absolute right to evict, which it is, and I say that, notwithstanding the comments that tenancy should be sustained where possible, and this isn't generally the time to be booting people out, but I come back to the point that rarely do landlords evict without a reason. There is normally a perfectly legitimate reason for a landlord relying on a Section 21 or other type of notice. Where landlords don't have confidence in the system, that gives rise to other problems. And it's the whack-a-mole approach to policy that I've referenced on this before. Well, curing the issue of evictions, is not done by closing the courts. And I don't endorse people using other methods, but I understand that if you've got a tenant that hasn't paid for 18 months and you use that money to live off, I can understand that you're going to be in a pretty crappy situation yourself and going to be thinking about different ways of going around things. That's why landlords must have confidence in the system. The court service must serve landlords as well as it serves tenants.
Well, very well said, Ben. Agree 100%. That kind of segues nicely into our first mini trending topic, and that is a landlord within our own midst has created a petition, and the wording on the petition is to allow landlords to evict tenants where there are 14 days arrears. And this petition has it's kind of divided the landlord community. It's been very interesting to see the responses. It now has over 8,700 signatures. When it gets to 10,000, it will generate a response from the government. So it looks well on its way to achieving that. But my own personal view, Ben, was it was very unfortunate timing to launch such a petition during a pandemic where people were in very, dire situations, and, lives were being, really turned upside down. I don't think the timing was great. And also I feel that any initiative like this shouldn't be unilateral. It should go to all industry stakeholders, get them all on board and behind it. That didn't happen with this petition. We had, as I mentioned, some people in favour of it, others not so keen on it on Property Tribes. It did generate a good discussion, which is always healthy, but just wondering what your view was on it.
Well, I think, we'd all like more favourable terms within which to operate in, wouldn't we? I'd personally like Section 24 reversed. I'd also, I'd like to have a better fiscal environment in which landlords can operate in. I think we have to be realistic around what we're calling for and ask ourselves why we're calling for it. So even if it does generate a response from the government are just going to come back and say, we're going to look at possession through the Renters Reform Bill, and that's pretty much the end of it. So, I understand why that petition may well be launched. I understand that it reflects landlords who have low confidence. Our own confidence barometer that we run, it's not rocket science. We've got hand grenades coming from every angle. It's unlikely to be a conducive environment for landlords to operate in. We know that. I think that the bit that we're working on as an association is on the Renters Reform Bill, where there is a proper vehicle within which there is an opportunity to have a better way of repossessing properties, both in terms of the amount of notice that's given, the mandatory element of that notice, but also the process. Let's not forget, the process has for a long time been totally crap, and it's that process that needs to be improved. I'd also like to see a greater focus on conciliation and mediation built into the process as well. So I understand why it's asked for. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. As an organisation, we don't want to just put things out there that are going to be populist. We want to get things achieved, and the government are not going to go to 14 days notice. That's the end of it.
I think there was some kind of justification of it, saying you always ask for a lot more and then you might get something. So I think it was kind of quite an extreme starting position, in the hope that you would get some middle ground somewhere.
And I understand the negotiating tactic, but my mother always told me there's a time and a place, and I'm not sure it was the time, and I'm not entirely sure it was the place. The conversation about notice periods can be had in a proper way as we start the bun fight that is the Renters Reform Bill, not during a global health crisis.
Indeed. Well, let's move swiftly on to our next featured topic, and that is the new TLIC report into Section 21. Very interesting research and ideas coming through from that. What's your view on it, Ben?
Yes, I thought it was a good report. It focuses on Section 21 and the impact around Section 21. It does make some recommendations there. Yeah, we've been clear as an association, having discussed with Chris Pincher, that Section 21 cannot go until such time that there is a proper and viable alternative for landlords to get possession. He agrees with that, and he's resisted pressure on two grounds. One, during the pandemic, to make Section 21 discretionary from a judge's perspective, and secondly, that the reform should be brought forward to scrap Section 21. And he said quite properly that it needs to be done in a considered way, and that's exactly the way that we feel it needs to be done. So the recommendations on the beyond the Section 21 report form a lot of the views that we as an association believe. So grounds for repossession need to be strengthened, and it needs to be quicker. The use of conciliation, actually building on some of the stuff that's happened during COVID, whilst some elements of the housing situation have pitched landlords and tenants against each other, let's not forget that a lot of the reason why people have managed to stay in their homes is because landlords have done the right thing. They have engaged with their tenants. They have sought to keep them in their homes. They've made some adjustments to rents according to our surveys, and in some instances they've let them out of contracts, or they've waived the rent entirely for a period of time. We've got really strong satisfaction in the PRS, yet we have a small minority of very bad news stories, and it's always those stories that irritatingly float to the top. So I do think mediation has got a part to play. Court reform, we've already discussed about. That's essential, and the bit that we absolutely agree with, I think TLIC have spoken around bailiff reform. The bit specifically that we as an association hate is that you get your possession order, you wait for the time to expire, and then bugger me, you have to go back and ask for another warrant for the bailiff. Well, that should just be an automatic process. And some of the discussions that we've been fortunate to have as part of the judicial working group for possessions have allowed us to make representations on this, normally to people that you can't lobby, like the senior judiciary, and we're making some inroads there. So we think the report is a sensible one. I don't think for 1 minute that Section 21 is going to be reversed, and that's not something that is being asked. There is a direction of travel on Section 21. So this is about looking forwards and saying, right, in a Section 21 free world, what does possession rights of landlords look like, and how's it going to work?
Okay, fantastic. Well, let's move on to our third mini topic. And this is a trending topic that's been running on Property Tribes for about 3 weeks now, which is a long time in terms of trending, because it tends to come and go within 3 or 4 days that something kind of gets traction on social media or on forums, and then it kind of dies away again. But this one's just run and run and run, and it's news that a lot of properties are being downvalued by up to 20%, because apparently banks are feeling nervous, lacking in confidence about future house prices, and they are instructing surveyors and valuers to downvalue properties. Now, of course, this massively impacts on landlords, particularly the old way of growing a portfolio to either enjoy some capital appreciation or force the appreciation and then refinance, or indeed if you're doing a development project and you want to cash back out of it and you get a down valuation, it's going to cause serious issues for landlord portfolio growth, I think.
I think it will. I think it also reflects, Vanessa, that we don't know enough about what's to come, and I guess that's why the banks are taking a cautious approach. We speak about being through the first phase, but we're now what seems to be quite well into a second phase of COVID. And I can well understand that the banks are taking a cautious view around their lending because, like the rest of us, we've no bloody idea, what the value of our homes are going to be is going to be in 6 months' time. I mean, personally, I'm just pleased I managed to remortgage before all of this stuff kicked off. But I've got one property that I will need to remortgage in March. I would normally plan well ahead, and I'm going to leave it a little bit until the situation is a bit clearer, both in terms of products and as well as the surveyors down valuing things. So I do. You're absolutely right. It will cause issues. But what my hope is that this is a short-term response, and as the economic position becomes clear, i.e., how much in the doo-doo are we? I think lenders will respond accordingly. The position is that we just have no clarity around when this nightmare is going to end.
Well, if it did become a long-term response, it could seriously, constrict supply of new properties into the sector. Landlords looking to expand.
Yep, and it would also restrict moving from one product to another, I would suggest, and you may well find that you end up getting left on these ridiculously high standard variable rates and not able to remortgage away. That would be my concern. I think it will take a brave man or woman to refinance to buy more property in this market, but the rewards will be out there. I think I'm more concerned about when my products come to an end and the availability of products and lending to make sure that I don't have to get stuck on a very high variable rate.
Well, that's what's happened to one of the landlords reporting on Property Tribes, and yeah, I think their mortgage payment has doubled since they had to revert to the SVR. So yes, I think that's
and you can't recover that sort of stuff. That is as I say, what my hope is that this is a short-term thing. It also reflects that as landlords we need to have a few quid away for a rainy day, because I think it's about to hammer it down in the not too distant future.
Well, indeed, we're actually on the brink of furlough ending as we end October. Winter is ahead. It is hard to see the positives, Ben, if I'm honest. I'm very fortunate. I don't have any tenants in rent arrears across my portfolio. I had one go onto a payment plan. They've stuck to it, and they're making up their arrears. I had one tenant on furlough. He's told me this month that he's been accepted back into his job, so that's good. So I feel fortunate for my own position, but I do struggle to see the positives. And when I feel like that, I always kind of look back to the fundamentals of property, and that every single person in this country does need a roof over their head. They're not building enough social housing, and there is demand for private sector property. So I kind of just hang on to all the things that got me into property in the first place. That's really how I keep my faith with it. How about you?
Well, like you, probably with a very large glass of wine would be my approach. But moreover, I kind of try and look at these things on a long-term basis. So, we've been operating 15, 20 years or whatever, in terms of landlording. What dip is this going to have in 5 years? Is it just going to be a blip on the chart? In which case, hopefully, we'll be able to live with that. Or is it going to be a more problematic thing? And again, we don't know. There will be some short-term challenges. As you know, I operate in the student market. Actually, I haven't had an issue with my tenants at all. I know in some areas, people have wanted to get out of contracts and study from home. Well, my lot have all been very happy to live where they're living, even though they can't access the campus because of all of the other benefits that brings. I don't know what that's going to be like when we come to tenant finding in January or February. I just don't know. So, I may be okay for the moment. It might be a difficult year next year. The other consideration is that I have a property that's coming empty at the end of November, which is a studio flat, nice little flat. If I fall on one of these won't pay tenants, that's going to cause me a high degree of pain. So my consideration is, well, what sort of steps will I take to make sure that I've got the right type of tenant in terms of risk? But frankly, there's no mitigation that you can really put in place if a good tenant simply loses their job and there isn't the financial support to help people navigate and keep in their homes. And this is one of the issues that is very live at the moment, particularly as furlough ends. I hate to be a glass half empty person because I'm not normally like that, but if you've got a decent tenant that suddenly because the financial support isn't there, that they can't afford their homes, and you've got 6 months notice, and you've got a court process that's about as effective as a chocolate teapot, what does that mean for your own circumstances? I spoke about confidence at the outset of this. That all comes back to it. If landlords aren't feeling confident, well, do you know what? I might just keep the property empty. It's probably less risky that way. I'm not advocating that as a strategy, but I can well imagine some landlords thinking, well, do you know what? I'm just going to leave it a month and see how things pan out, or I'm going to have a guarantor with every single tenant. These are the types of questions we need to be asking ourselves. So, in terms of the actual COVID hit, I hope that we can look back in 5 years and see a little bit of a blip on a graph, and the business goes from strength to strength. The slight problem is, my crystal ball is slightly hazy at the moment, and we don't know enough. These sessions are helpful to tease out some of these issues, but they're by no means conclusive in terms of where we are with life at the moment. And that's as applicable to housing as it is to the economy, as it is to a whole range of stuff.
No, I totally agree. I think one sort of other little thing that has improve my personal confidence is I'm very invested in the London property market. I have 1 and 2 bed flats in various postcodes in North and East London. As I say, no tenant arrears at the moment, touch wood. But we've seen all these media headlines of tenants moving out of cities, and all these trends that are occurring because of the kind of reaction to the COVID-19 lockdown. And I've recently come on the view that I believe these actually to be very short-term trends, and that they're actually being formed by people that were thinking of doing that particular thing anyway, and they've just been kind of given that extra push by experiencing the COVID lockdown. So I believe that there may be a short-term exodus of people from London, but I believe that they're probably the people that were thinking of moving anyway. So I think that COVID has amplified certain sort of trends, but only in a hopefully in a short-term manner, and that we see very positive things coming up out of big companies taking up massive office space in cities, and these are the positives that we can indeed focus on, and I share all of them when I come across them onto Property Tribes Forum, because I want landlords to see, a glimmer of hope, that silver lining coming through in all these dark clouds.
I think it will also give opportunity, Vanessa. I think there are. It's almost certain. Sorry, I don't know if you could hear a phone ringing there, but that was me. Apologies. Can you hear it? Sorry, I've got this new app. Hold on, let me just close this. I'm so sorry. Remove. Apologies.
Well, it's
So
live.
I think I don't know what it is. It's very annoying. I think the short-term element will give some potential for some quite interesting developments. So I think, what we do know so far is that people, particularly during lockdown, have very much valued their gardens, and those that are in flats and so forth have really missed, some of the benefits that brings. So I think, if your properties have a garden and so forth, that they might suddenly become more desirable. These are the inevitable swings and roundabouts that come with being a landlord. I don't know that we will necessarily see massive long-term moves to working from home, or from moves away from big cities. London's great. It's a great place to be. So I think we don't know enough at the moment. So I think there will be some short-term movements, as you say. I think there will almost certainly be a work from home element as businesses decide how much office space that they need. But what that means in terms of people's living habits, it depends what else they're in that area for, and the other benefits that property brings. So I think with challenge comes opportunity, to strike a slightly more upbeat note.
Yes, indeed. And don't read the Daily Mail is my advice. So many
sound advice.
Emotive headlines to grab eyeballs. I mean, just briefly on London again. I read an article this week that says it's one of only 3 truly global cities, and obviously it has one thing that no other city has, and that is Greenwich Mean Time, which means that markets are open on both sides of the world when London is doing business. So that's not going to change. So the other interesting thing I read, Ben, was that it's becoming a life sciences hub. So that's a kind of direct result of COVID, that a lot of big tech companies are coming in that are seeking answers to COVID problems and other life science issues. So, as you say, there are positives out there that we can really sort of latch onto and help us keep the faith with all of this, when there's so much negativity and bad news appearing all over the place. But don't read the broadsheets, the really kind of speculative ones that just have all these outrageous headlines, because it will impact on you and your thinking. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. And as a landlord, you have to take a longer term view on things. There will be ups and downs, whether COVID is there or not, frankly, as supply and demand changes. So I think the best thing that you can do is to take certainly a medium to long term view. Certainly from what we've seen during the pandemic, the vast majority of people are able to pay their rents. There have been tweaks for those that can't, and there is help out there. I would still like to see some more support of the sector, particularly as furlough comes to an end. But I think, as an investor, I'm going to be taking a longer term view, and keeping my fingers crossed in the short term, frankly.
Fantastic. Well, I'd just actually like to flag up that we have recorded a fantastic webinar with Bill Irvine, who I believe is the top authority on LHA and universal credit for landlords in the UK. We've got a webinar with Bill on property tribes at the moment. It's in the featured articles panel if you want to find it. Otherwise, I can put a link below the recording of this webinar on property tribes. But it is an update on everything going on with LHA and UC as we approach the end of furlough. And Bill's given out some really fantastic and helpful insights to people that are, to landlords that aren't used to navigating the LHA and UC system, and how to, connect with the DWP, find the right case manager to help you, etc. So I do urge all landlords to start educating themselves about tenants going into receipt of benefits, because we've always said this, Ben, even the most incredible career tenant, that they're 1p45 away from potentially going into receipt of benefits.
That's right, and I think that perhaps landlords. In fact, I'm talking about this very subject tomorrow on a podcast with Tessa Shepperson, actually. But the whole concept of around landlords and benefits is quite an interesting one, and frankly, we're going to have to up our game in terms of understanding how this works and some of the challenges that are there. Because with inevitable job losses, there will be people that you're dealing with that are going to be reliant on these benefits, and as a landlord, you need to be ahead of the game in terms of understanding how these things work. Not wishing to steal your thunder, by the way, we've got Bill Irvine doing a webinar in November, I think, as well. So it's another hot topic, and it may well be one for a further deep dive on this session in the not too distant future.
Yes, well, I can't recommend Bill highly enough. He's so knowledgeable on this topic, and he provides such good resources to the landlord community. We're very, very lucky to have him as a partner of Property Tribes, and also working closely with the NRLA. It's interesting, Ben, you mentioned your studio flat, and slightly concerned whether you'd get it relet. We're always talking on Property Tribes about what can we do to have the edge over other landlords' properties, and there are some very obvious things you can do. Make yours the best possible property in the marketplace, look at the competition, price accordingly, etc., all that good solid stuff. But in recent times, I've become quite enamored of deposit alternatives, because I think that they can give you an edge if you offer that option, and I am speaking from first-hand experience. I have had a 4-bedroomed house in Ashton-under-Lyne in Manchester, which has been quite problematic over the years, and had a very bad tenant in there who left with very significant rent arrears, painted the entire house pink, smashed down the garage door, various other bits and pieces, which I won't bore you with. But after that, after I'd done my full refurb, I struggled a little bit to get a tenant in there, and then I offered a deposit alternative, which in this case was 0 deposit, and I got a much wider pool of tenants applying, and I was able to pick a very nice lady whose husband works in the oil industry in Aberdeen, and he acted as a guarantor. So, is that something that you would consider as a landlord?
Yeah, it is. We used, in my previous career when I worked at Touchstone, we used to use 0 deposits when it was slightly newer than it is today, on a very targeted basis. A bit like the one that you referred to, where you need to have a little bit more edge over competing properties, and that worked quite well for us. I think the issue around the 0 deposits concept is one of clarity from the point of view of the end user. So tenants need to fully appreciate what they're signing up to. They need to understand the terms of those arrangements, and whether or not there might be any residual liability when they move out. But the concept of a 0 deposit is a really sound one. As a landlord, I want to make sure that if I need to make a claim, that my claim is going to be dealt with quickly and sensibly. And I think certainly a number of those policies meet that test. But there are concerns from the tenant audience around will it end up costing me more than a deposit? Did I know what I'm signing up to? I have a fairly straightforward view on I don't know what I signed up to. Well, if you read it and you signed it, you shouldn't have done that if you don't understand what the consequences are. So I think making sure that people properly understand what the terms of those 0 deposits are is really, really important. And of course, they must always be put on the table with a cash alternative. But one of the things that we're going to be talking about with the Renters Reform Bill is around their lifetime deposit and the concept of taking your deposit from property to property. I think that zero deposits has a role, or the zero deposit product or concept, I should say, has a role to play in that. But it will be very interesting to see how the government satisfies the requirement of a lifetime deposit, because actually they're trying to solve a problem that I think has already been partially solved. The zero deposit was brought in to address affordability, which is great. But since then, deposits have been capped at 5 weeks or 6 weeks if your rent's over a certain amount, and you don't have to pay any fees as a tenant. So there's immediately more money that is available, and I kind of think that the lifetime deposit discussion that the government have legislate or have committed to legislate for, it will be quite interesting to see how they do that in light of a deposit-free alternative that seems to be settling in the marketplace.
Yes, it's interesting to see how this gains traction in landlords and what happens at the end of a tenancy. I know, for example, that zero deposits uses TDS as their independent dispute resolution service, so not dissimilar to existing schemes, but it's still in its infancy. But landlords who want to get the edge should definitely research it. We've got loads of educational resources on Property Tribes. We've got interviews with some of the scheme operators. So, I definitely think it's worth considering. Another thing that you can do to make your property more attractive is to allow a let with a pet. And this takes us nicely onto our main trending topic that we're going to deep dive onto just for the next 10 minutes or so. Ben, this is a very trending topic on Property Tribes. We've had an MP introduce a new bill to make it mandatory for landlords to accept pets. This has once again divided the landlord community. We've had 147 comments on our thread on this topic, which is a lot. It's a tricky one, Ben. With your studio flat, for instance, you couldn't likely offer a pet in there because it would be against your lease. So how is this new bill going to deal with leasehold terms that don't allow pets? My personal view is all my 3 cats were here and I was going to bring one in and they've all disappeared. I've got 3 Bengal tiger cats, and pets, I think, really do enrich your life. And I think one of the trends that we've seen post-COVID is that there's been a big upswell in people wanting a dog because they've been out walking more and they appreciate having a dog with them, and other people wanting pets because they feel isolated and they've got kids at home a lot, that kind of thing. So it is a kind of trend that we're seeing as a result of COVID, coinciding with this new bill that's being proposed. But it's just not it's not as straightforward as just saying, oh yes, everybody can have a pet. I mean, there's different pets, they have different impacts on properties, they can cause issues. It really is quite a big topic, isn't it, Ben?
It is, and I'm slightly miffed by the whole sort of debate, really, because on the one hand, I don't really have a massive problem with pets in property. I think what the argument is that it shouldn't be done by default. No DSS, no pets, none of this, none of that. Actually, as a landlord, we need to be slightly more open and inclusive with our applicants. But I've got a 6-bed HMO. if everybody wanted a cat or a dog in there, well, that'd be a bloody nightmare to manage, frankly. I also think that it's somehow at odds with what the government have announced, announced in previous years. So everybody, and you may disagree with this, Vanessa, with being a cat owner. So I'm happy to have my eyes scratched out by your whatever the name of your cats were. But the point is that deposits have been capped at 5 weeks rent. Okay. If I'm given a choice between somebody with a dog and somebody not with a dog, what am I going to go with? I'm probably going to go with the one that doesn't have a dog, because over the course of, and we have to weigh this up. I get the point that people might be more inclined to stay, make it their own place, which is totally what I want. But I'm also would have some concerns about the damage and my ability to be able to recoup some of those losses. So I would almost say I've no problem with having pets, but I need to be able to recoup any damage that is caused by animals, and against a backdrop of a 5 week deposit, that doesn't cut it for me. I also think that, as you say, we've got some fundamental issues with regards to head leases that might need to be overcome. In fact, I'm reminded of one of my tenants who I did let keep a rabbit in the property, only to be I'd forgotten. I don't know about you, but when I think about pets, I think about cats and dogs. But of course, it could be chickens, it could be rabbits. I let a tenant keep a rabbit in her property. And she got a fairly snotty letter from the management company, asking for all sorts of information about this rabbit, what the rabbit's name was, how old it was, how often they were vaccinated, all sorts of irrelevant nonsense. And I don't know that sort of thing has been thought about in this announcement. So I think the principle of the announcement, and I should say this guy, this isn't a new policy. Andrew Rosendale, it's his pet project, I think, quite literally. He's mentioned this a few times before. So the concept is perfectly sound, but with everything, you need to bring landlords along with you. And we have spoken with him actually as an association and given him some feedback from the landlord community, and he is taking that on board as part of his suggestion. I also, dare I say it, given imminent job losses, the economy about to fall off a cliff, the amount of deaths caused by COVID, I wonder if this is one of those announcements that may well be quite far down the immediate pecking order. So I think there's some merit to it. I think it needs to be done in the right sort of way that brings landlords along with them. But it's all too easy to say that landlords must accept pets. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't, I don't want 6 rabbits or 6 dogs in a property, and that's the background of what we're having to balance. So consent should not be unreasonably withheld, I would say.
No, I think you mentioned the damage caused by pets. A gerbil is not likely to cause any damage, but then if you've got a very large dog that has chewed all the skirtings off and done a lot of damage and created bad smells, etc., that can be very significant and expensive damage that probably wouldn't be covered by a deposit. Then you've got the issue of potentially fleas being left and then having to do a massive deep clean, and it can't be a blanket thing, like as you said, because pets have different impact on a property. I think I would just like to flag up the Cats Protection, who have what they call the Perfect Landlords campaign. They've done a lot of good work in this area, where they've created educational resources for both tenants and landlords of how to incorporate a pet into a rental property that works for all parties, and of course the pet itself. And this includes providing vets records to prove that they're a responsible pet owner, and that kind of thing. And one thing you can do if a tenant is applying for a property and they want to bring a pet, obviously COVID restrictions permitting, you could go and visit the tenant, the prospective tenant, in their current home and see what impact the pet has had on that property. So that there are a few little things that you can do to decide whether the pet is right for your rental property or not. But the research does definitely show that if you allow pets, you do get a wider pool of tenants to choose from. And also, as you say, Ben, they very often want to stay a long time because they fear they might not be able to take a pet to a new home. So it is, I think it's good to have these discussions around this topic.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I'm sort of a bit old-fashioned on this point. I kind of think that as well as the actual animal itself, one has to have reference and cognizance of the type of property that it's going into. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to get a dog, and I went to one of these dogs' homes and so forth, and they ask, are you going to be about during the day? Are you going to be here? Are you going to be there? Well, I'm going to be working during the day. It's obviously before COVID, so I was declined the ability to buy a dog because I wasn't going to be at home during the day. I thought that was quite an interesting one, and I think the actual landlords know their properties best, and I don't think there should be a blanket ban, but I would encourage landlords to be as receptive as they can be to these types of things. But I remind the MP against the backdrop to which landlords are operating.
Indeed. And if you do take a pet on board, one thing I would recommend, which you should be doing anyway, in my opinion, is your midterm property inspections, because you can soon tell if a pet is having a negative impact on a property. Indeed, a friend of mine let quite a large house with garden to a dog owner, and their midterm property inspection revealed that the dog had used the garden as a toilet, and you literally could not walk on the grass because of the amount of dog doo-doo. And obviously it's a health issue, but you don't want to go to the end of a tenancy and find that you've got a serious dog fouling problem to have to deal with. So I think, I'm sure you'd agree, Ben, that if you do take a pet on board, to have a look at these midterm property inspections, maybe one when they've moved in, maybe 3 months after they've moved in, and thereafter maybe biannually would be about the right frequency, in my opinion.
Definitely, and don't fall into the trap of letting people have chickens in your property either. As you know, I used to keep chickens, and when I was at TDS, we used to deal with so many disputes about chickens tearing up gardens. It was absolutely ridiculous. They just eat your garden. I remember going on holiday for 2 weeks, coming back and thinking, oh, bugger me, I actually don't have any grass left. So if your tenants want chickens, I would probably draw the line there.
Okay, well, we're just coming to the end here now, and as always, we've just got a couple of minutes to answer questions that have been raised throughout the webinar. So I'd like to invite the event host, Marion, to join us on camera. Marion, have you got any questions for us just as we wrap this up?
So thank you, Ben and Vanessa. So we have had some pre-submitted questions. One of them's A4 size, so I'm going to précis that down. And he's talking about minimum energy efficient standards, MEES, and suggesting it's the biggest threat to the viability of the PRS in the medium term. He's suggesting that a lot of the PRS is older housing stock and will never be likely to achieve a level A EPC. And spoiler alert, I've heard that phrase before, a large exit from the PRS or further increases in rent. And a little bit of a discussion about the government trying to remove or reduce the demand for the use of energy before incurring carbon dioxide costs of manufacturing renewable heat sources. But is this only for the PRS, or why isn't the same drive being targeted at new first-time buyers and probably existing homeowners as well? Why is PRS being selected?
Probably because it's an easy target, to be honest with you, and to be blunt. So a couple of points on that. We had a meeting with I forget his name now, Kwasi Kwarteng, I think it is, the energy minister, in this month, actually talking about this very issue. There is obviously a direction of travel towards greater energy efficient homes. There is a consultation out at the moment. I'd encourage everybody to take a look at that and give your views. The more views of landlords that are put into that, the better, frankly. I still think the direction of travel is such that it is towards greater energy efficient homes to the private rented sector, but landlords must have their say. The other thing that's worth referencing is the Green Homes grants that are out at the moment. It's not the most generous scheme, but frankly, it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And there are grants available for upgrading on energy efficiency. And given the direction of travel that is clearly set, which is that they want to get to a C by 2028 for all tenancies, and new tenancies from April 2025. It would seem to me, if you are in it for the long haul, that you want to take advantage of some of this funding that's available now, because there's no guarantee that it will be available again in the future. So I get that was a very long question, but hopefully a couple of points there to partially satisfy the answer.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Ben. Vanessa,
I think we've got time for one. Let's do one more, Marion.
Okay, well, I'm taking them in the order that I've got them. This question is about the disaggregation of houses of multiple occupation, where there seems to be a random selection by the VOA of single banding HMO rooms. The question is, he's seen a growing concern of this postcode lottery, and he's concerned it's going to drive down the quality of the HMOs and or increase rents. What would you think, Ben, about lobbying for the change in government policy to clarify what a single dwelling is, or seek a different banding for such dwellings?
Yeah, so I know I caught up with our policy team on this. It's something that the legacy organisations have been quite involved in. It remains something that the NRLA wants to get involved in as well. I mean, it's a growing problem. It's not a new problem, but it's certainly a growing one. I think the issue for us is around finding the right vehicle within which to be able to affect that. It's quite a nuanced policy area, but it's clearly one that's having a sizable impact on HMO operators. So that's something we can take away as part of our homework.
Yes, I'll just jump in there, Ben, and say we've got a very, very long-running thread on this topic on property tribes, and my general meanderings around forums and Facebook groups. It does seem to be an increasing issue, and it is a postcode lottery. You just don't know how the VOA is going to treat the rooms in your HMO. So it's, again, one thing landlords don't like is uncertainty, and this is another kind of niggling thing in the background that's kind of hanging over us, isn't it?
It is, and the only thing that's certain at the moment is uncertainty. So I think there's a piece of work that we can do on this area. It may well be quite a niche area, but it's an important one. So we'll come back on that particular point. I wonder whether we could just quickly squeeze in one more question, Marion, and then we can call it a day, if that's okay.
Yes, there is just a quick one. There are a few sort of personal questions that have come in, and I would encourage everybody to take those questions through to the advice line because they are quite individual. But Rob is asking, Ben, if you'd be asking members to contribute to the NRLA policy on the Renters Reform Bill.
We will. So we've done quite a lot of work on this, and one of the things that our campaigning team have now been tasked with is member engagement on, I've referenced some bits that we've spoken about today around strengthening possession rights and court reform. They're all up there, but there are some other bits in there as well, and I do want to make sure that that members understand some of the things that we're going to be calling for, as well as to give them the opportunity to comment and tailor and change them. So watch this space.
Awesome. Well, that just about wraps up our October Landlord Lens. We do hope you've enjoyed it. This broadcast will be available on Property Tribes tomorrow if you would like to review it, and we'll put all the links that we discussed underneath the video if you want to investigate some of the topics that we've covered a little bit further and in more depth. Ben, I guess just to say thank you very much as always for your insights today, and we will be back in November, won't we?
We will. Plenty more to talk about, no doubt.
But for now, we're just saying thank you to everybody for watching. We do hope you've got value from our discussions today. And as Marion said, if you've got any very specific and individual issues you would like assistance with, then the NRLA advice line is open from 9 to 5. I call it phone a friend for landlords, so do take advantage of that because it's all part of your NRLA membership. And if you're not a member, then please do join via Property Tribes, because we offer a £15 discount off the membership fees. I hope Ben doesn't mind me just flagging that up. We've got a little incentive there for landlords on Property Tribes to get £15 off.
The more the merrier. We need all the savings we can get.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you very much to everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Landlord Lens. But from myself and Ben, it's bye-bye for now.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.